We'll give the floor now to Piotr Barczak from European Environment Bureau to moderate the panel.
Thank you, Mikhail. So yes, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Delphine, and thank you all previous speakers also for your presentations. I haven't seen all of them, but I have a feeling that I've seen some of the presentations sent to me over email, and I have a feeling that it was really comprehensive and covered a lot of points. Actually, Delphine's last presentation really comprehensively wrapped up a lot of points that are so important in this discussion. Thank you very much also to organizers for having that and having me also to wrap up and to go through the final debate. First of all, I ask already all of you to put your comments or questions in the chat in whatever language you want. Okay, we will deal with that. We will find a solution for sure to translate that. So don't be afraid. Please write your questions and comments. And second thing I want to say now, before we finish, at the end of this panel, there will be a link to a movie. The movie, so the last slide of Delphine was about the story of plastic. The movie done by the story of staff, very recently, recently screened, also available in community screenings like this one. So please stay until the end. The link will be shared with you. It's a link only for you, and you will be able to watch the film until end of tomorrow, if I'm right. Please correct me, organizers, if it's wrong. Well, tomorrow, during the second day of the debate of the conference, you can also discuss the topics. It's worth to watch it already tonight to have more input for tomorrow. So please, again, don't be afraid to put your questions and answers. While you do this, I can just maybe drive a bit the discussion that I would like we focus on, and that everybody has some takeaways from this conference. Really, we all know already about the problem. We don't need to repeat that. Let's focus on solutions. Let's focus on where to push the button, you know, where to press within your competence. So either if it's local or very local or national or even international level. What are the leverages? So as you've seen that very well shown also in Delphine's presentation, plastic pollution is not a waste management only problem. It's a whole supply chain, it's a whole production problem. At every stage of plastic production, we have a problem, and you will see that in the movie. I've seen that a few times already. So yes, how each of these parts of supply chain can be, supply element can be addressed big time, okay? We are not looking at only small incremental improvements, but a big change that we need while knowing all these problems of plastics. So starting from fracking that was mentioned also in the last presentation, how economically maybe plastic should be addressed and how the reduction of its use should be incentivized economically and legally. Whether companies have a role to play apart from just their commitments that are not always met or very often not met, and then the role of citizens. But here really maybe we can also go to that, but the question about cleanups.
Для меня это граждане, но это граждане, да? Citizens.
Граждане, citizens is граждане?
Yes.
I don't know that. Yes, okay, great. Yes, the questions of cleanups, I said. So how to maybe change the concept of cleanups? You know, many of us NGOs think about cleanups as a great way to educate, but there could be a better way to do cleanups if mixed or if assisted by a brand audit, as it was also mentioned in Delphine's presentation. Don't be afraid. Let's not be afraid to name and shame all those companies that are responsible for it. They have measures, they have ways to address it, but they don't do this. So how this can be done? And the question that is also interesting is to see that that very often it is said that pollution is in Asia, right, or somewhere in Africa. But actually, do we also have, we Europeans or the Western world, do we have responsibility in this? our companies that are, produced here in Europe, they also sell their products there. And do they really take the same standards or the same, responsibility here as there? Or they play and surf on the wave of law or governance or lack of regulation in those countries. So this is also interesting to discuss if you want. I stop here because I want really all of you to feel free to ask questions and comments, so we can, with our speakers and all of us, we are about 32 people here now. And let's review the chat. I see we have only chat. We don't have a question to answers. Okay. So a question to all panelists from Anna. All of the panelists, if you want to answer, feel free, take the mic. What would be your ideal world in order for you can achieve what you are working on? What are the main enablers you are currently missing, which would help you, your organizations or your organization, to speed up the process you are working on? What enablers, what ideal world order you would like to see? Delphine, you raise your hand, please.
Thanks, and I will link to your question about economical and legal leverages. I think it would be a long answer to talk to you about my ideal world and everything that needs to happen for that. That involves smashing patriarchy and this kind of things. But when it comes to plastic, I think one of the major issues we have is the price of virgin plastic. It's really low. And at the moment, because of the crash of the oil and gas prices with the pandemic, it's even lower. It's almost like we are paid to buy oil and gas at the moment. So it's really, really damageable for any effort we are trying to do in terms of prevention. So there is really something to do in using economical instruments to and it's coming back at the EU level to tax virgin plastic production, to fill the gap, to fill the price gap between virgin plastic and recycled plastic. That also supposes for recycled plastic to be safe, so that's the transparency issue on the presence of chemicals in products and in waste that I have highlighted. We also need legislative measures. And targets are useful if they are accompanied with instruments like economical instruments. We have some very useful targets in the Single-Use Plastic Directive around collection of beverage bottles. And we also have a suggestion of prevention targets for certain items. We will need to have actual prevention targets for a lot of items that would be like European-wide targets. And ideally, at some point, we need a cap on plastic production. We need to cap plastic production. If we want to really tackle the issue, we need to cap it, and then we need to make sure that we use the recycled material safely, and then we need to have the reuse systems, because plastic is not recyclable forever. It's not a closed loop, and it will never be a closed loop. So you will always need virgin plastic to maintain the same level of consumption that we're having right now with single-use items, which is absolutely not what we want to do. We want to switch to reusable systems and reusable products. So incentivizing reuse with better VAT rates or subsidies is also really important. Having the right infrastructures in place, having producers contributing to reuse systems. Like for now, they're mostly contributing to collection, recycling, and sometimes even in certain countries to incineration and landfilling. And they really need to switch the support of the producer responsibility schemes to prevention and reuse. They're investing a lot of money in advertising for recycling. They're not investing a lot of money on prevention. So it's really about shifting where the money goes. Where the money goes is going to be the real question, has always been the real question, but in the next month with the recovery fund and all this discussion about just transition, where is the money going to go is going to be the main question. And at the moment, we are not investing in the right places to really operate the transition we need.
Thank you, Delphine. Many points you raised are very right and very clear. The last one on investments, we clearly see that in their accounts when they invest in waste prevention, it is like 1.5 million while in the new plant facilities, so industry, to make new plastic, they plan over 200 billion euro. So 1 billion versus 200 billion, that is just striking and very much telling, or on how their priorities are. I would like to ask other speakers also to explain what enablers would they like to see in their daily work, and what would the ideal world to implement those demands would look like. Would it be more NGO activism? Would it be more networking? Would it be citizens activism? Evgeny, please.
Thank you, Piotr. Well, I will try to be short. I think, well, at least in many countries, I see there is a lacking interest to the topic of plastic, both from the society and actually from governments. When we're looking even at the situation in Russia, in Belarus, in Ukraine, in many former Soviet Union countries, actually in many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, I think the plastic at the moment is not really on top of environment agenda. And I think we need to do much more in terms of education, awareness raising of public, and actually I think that we should not really talking only about environmental perspectives, because so far I see that we're mainly using like environmental arguments when we're talking about like single-use plastics and plastic pollution. But we need to employ more about linkages of plastic and health effects, about like negative impacts of plastic and health, all this information about toxic substances, toxic pollution, that it's not possible to proper recycle plastic with chemical additives afterwards, and etc. And of course we need to push more for regulation, because what we see now, especially in terms of COVID-19 crisis, that well, I'm really surprised that so many shops, restaurants, cafes, so quickly switching back to single-use plastics, and I'm not sure that they will well come back to reusables after the situation is somehow improved with COVID.
Yeah, touching on your last point, there is a question exactly on this: how COVID will affect our lives in terms of plastics. Whether should be we as much skeptical and say that restaurants will never come back to reusables, or there is a role for us to play here and defend reusables?
Actually, it's definitely a role for us, and it's we have to do it, because otherwise, I think a lot of previous efforts would be just somehow disappear. And well,
how to do that? Does anybody have an answer? How to regain the trust, or how to show that maybe plastics is not really as great anti-COVID, anti-spread of disease instrument, or Delphine, please.
Sorry, I don't want to keep the mic, but we've been working a lot on first showing that that plastic is one of the material where the virus stays active the longest. So just for your information. Second, you mostly get it through the air. So there is very little chance that you get it through any surface. And if you do get it through a surface, plastic is probably one of the worst. So it's been also, I think what this crisis has shown us as well, with all what happened in the cafes that were still, or restaurants that were still doing takeaway in the packaging for shops, is that we need reuse systems. Like we need larger scale reuse systems where you can have reusable containers that are centrally washed with like safety standards to protect the producer, the workers in the stores and in the restaurants and cafes, and the consumer at the same time. But there are also super simple things that you can be doing. If you look at the work of City2C, they have put out this very super simple campaign about contactless coffee. How can you go without any contact, getting a coffee in a reusable mug that will not harm you, that will not harm the person who's serving the coffee? And it is so simple that it's ridiculous. that we're still having this discussion. So it's a 2-minute video. I just encourage you to watch it, to show it to anyone, any cafe owner that you like to go to.
Thank you. Could you paste?
Yeah, I will paste the link in the
thank you.
Find it.
Thank you, thank you. It's really true, like medical studies prove that plastic is one of well, actually it is the material where the virus survives the most. So still we see a lot of greenwashing, or not greenwashing, how to call it, confusion sold by industry, plastic industry, trying to prove that plastic is the solution, while it's clearly not. And even if here in Brussels, we not only in the US as well, we see plastic industries trying to delay all the strict restrictions put on plastic, put on those items, single-use items. So yeah, how much lobbying? There were more questions. Yes, from Maria. We mentioned plastic waste trade and restrictions in plastic waste shipments. Indeed, there is a revision of regulation on this in Europe. Can we, if we stop plastic waste trade shipment, can we face more incineration? Are there incentives for recyclers? Yeah, that's very much, I guess, country-based. There are incentives in some countries, there are less incentives in other countries. If you would like to, if anyone would like to address this from their perspective. Maria, or would you like to elaborate maybe also on this? You feel free to take the mic.
I think that's so clear, that's so understandable, and it doesn't touch only one country. Mm-hmm. But we need help. We need some help, and I'm waiting for help from all of you.
Mm-hmm. Maybe what also Delphine mentioned, one of the help for recyclers to enlarge their facilities and to even to basically find their way in this crisis, because as it was said, the prices of oil went so much down that it is not economically viable to recycle plastics anymore. So maybe one of the solutions is the plastic tax that was also mentioned today. Putting a tax on virgin plastics so that it will be more interesting to use recycled material, to use recycled plastics, recycled content, and that would feed, and incentivize more recyclers. That would save them. This is one of the incentives I'm thinking of. And yeah, waste incineration is clearly not the solution. It can happen that countries which will not be able to send their waste anymore to China, actually this happens, but to other countries, even to Poland, then they might think about building more incineration. And this is precisely not the way to go, because the way to go is reduction of production and consumption of plastics in the first place, reuse, and improving recycling. Now the question about how decision makers will really take it, right? This is my feeling about this. I see Nabu has a question, David. What are your top 3 arguments to convince governments, companies to support a reduction of plastic consumption instead of supporting investments into plastic production? Top 3 arguments to convince governments and companies to support a reduction of plastic consumption.
I think plastic production is one of the highest, the most risky investment at the moment. And you see it with the oil and gas prices at the moment. And you see it with also some lawsuits that we have done in the US in particular, where some plastic companies have had to pay millions or even billions of dollars to clean up the plastic pellet loss pollution. I would say that also with everything that we have in the legislation that is either about to be implemented or will have in a mandatory way to be implemented in the next years, it doesn't make any sense to keep producing that much. And we have managed to go that far with an NGO movement on pushing things. It means that we're not going to stop here. So the restrictions that we have now, hopefully, are only going to increase. So it's also about jobs, like this argument about jobs is the main one that the plastic production industry is using. But those jobs are really bad jobs most of the time. They are really precarious and dangerous. Well, when you look at zero-waste business models and zero-waste cities and all the alternatives that the movement is showcasing at the moment, they are creating high-quality jobs locally that you cannot relocate to other countries. So it's really about recentering the debate on the solutions and showing how risky continuing the way we're doing is for the economy of the country. And also, I think that's why we came together as a movement, is really to show that we're not going to let these things happen. And that maybe before they could go away with it, but now they can't anymore. Because we have people in all countries that are really showing that. We just sent a letter to the UK government to ask them to do not grant a bailout to Ineos. Like those very companies that are fighting the fact of paying taxes in the countries where they're producing stuff are now asking government money to continue producing those stuff. So it's really like, and they also like go into fiscal paradise and like tax evasion and all that, and now they're asking for help from the governments. So it's really about like telling the governments, hey, don't be fooled. Like really don't be fooled. There is a better way, and it's much better for the local economy.
We are in this decisive moment, right? Which companies that are preferable and desirable should be saved and bailed out, and which actually should be left to die, if I call it this way strictly. And on top of arguments you mentioned, I would also mention something that Evgeny repeat. So is about health. Health is also one of the arguments that may speak to some, maybe not to all, but to many. I would think it speaks. So it's convincing. And you also mentioned about the movement of citizens, and this should also, according to me, be a huge convincing argument. The more we are break free from plastics, how many hundreds, 1,800 organizations all over the world, right? In Europe, how many organizations? What about inviting other local organizations in your countries to join the movement and to create this critical mass, which is already quite huge, but the more the better, the more spread of the messages, the better. Then politicians must feel it. And also, the politicians will be chosen. They will be verified in elections in all of our countries. So this is also a direct movement that all of us have, direct action all of us have in place and in hands. I don't see any more questions, and we are approaching the time to finish. So I would just repeat that have a look at Break Free from Plastics movement. Try to join it. Have a look at the film this evening or tomorrow, if Mikael can explain how long and how to access this, please. That would be great. Yes, and have also, join NGOs movement, support us it's also true that I would like to say, each of us citizens may not have enough capacity, time, knowledge to follow everything and to push everywhere. It's simply not possible. But if you can support NGOs, experts who do this on their daily basis, this is also part of your engagement that would be very much welcomed. I thank you, everyone, for participation. Now I leave it back to organizers of this event, and I hope to see you around. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Thank you very much for all those contributors to this debate. Well, it was short, but it was really interesting.